From the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Thursday in December to look ahead to Sunday's game against the Cincinnati Bengals. We are going to preview that game, talk about Lamar Jackson missing yet another Wednesday practice, though this one was not injury related. We'll break down what that means for Jackson, what that means for the team, and whether his lack of practice time is perhaps affecting his play on Sundays. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, good to see you bright and early this morning after our Banner holiday party last night. You had a good time? Had used two of your drink tickets, I believe?
To quote Benicio del Toro, I had a few small beers.
A few small beers. Benicio del Toro's character in One Battle After Another. Sensei, yes. Is that the movie of the year? One Battle After Another?
Looks like it. I think Benicio is also the favorite for Best Supporting Actor.
Is he?
I believe so.
Wow. I mean, he was outstanding in that.
Yeah.
Just a great movie.
I very rarely see a movie twice in theaters, but I made an exception for that one.
You know which movie I'm excited to see the second time that I saw earlier this year?
The Ten Commandments.
Was that a movie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did they redo it? No Charlton Heston?
just talking about the old one.
I'm excited to see Baltimoreans again because I saw it the first time, but it's a Christmas movie and it did not come out around Christmas time, but I'm going to rewatch it. And you still haven't seen it, right?
Nope.
There's so many Ravens references that I think you'll enjoy.
Nice.
It's truly, as you can tell, written by somebody who gets Ravens fandom and Baltimore fandom in general.
I'm partially hoping for Lamar Jackson to turn things around, which we're about to get into, so that all of the memes that I have made about Marty Supreme being La Marty Supreme become eminently usable. Speaking of which, I bought like 6 or 7 tickets last night for the family for a Christmas Day screening in Montgomery County. So
wow,
also excited for that movie. It's supposed to be very, very good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too. I'm glad that you made that transition to Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson.
Supreme.
First, let's talk about some of the other absences from Wednesday's practice. Run through the injury report here. Chidobe Awuzie was missing from practice with a shoulder injury on Wednesday, and then limited participants in practice. Keaton Mitchell with the knee injury. It's good that he avoided the worst case scenario. Anytime a guy goes down with a knee injury and then is ruled out fairly early in a game, you have some concerns. But he tweeted out the other day that the prayer emoji, that he got some good news.
Yep.
John Harbaugh said he got some good news. So limited in practice is about the best case scenario that you can ask for after that. Nate Wiggins with a foot injury was limited. And then Tavius Robinson, of course, working his way back from the foot injury, still on IR, but he told reporters that he expects to play Sunday. So that leads us to Lamar Jackson, who was missing from practice Wednesday, but non-injury related. It was a rest day. The past 4 weeks, he has missed 1 day of practice each week. He has not had a full week of practice since week 10 when the Ravens were preparing for the Minnesota Vikings. This being a specific rest day, not to have an injury designation, though, is new. We've seen the hamstring, obviously, that he missed time with, the knee, the ankle, the toe. We've seen everything from the lower body down. We have not seen a rest day. How surprising was that, Jonas, that he was given a non-injury related rest day?
Surprising. I don't know. I think we got a bit of a clue from Lamar on Friday when we talked to him. I asked him on Friday, basically like what the plan was for last week. Because I think he'd said something about, I think I asked him whether him being stepped on had led him to not finish the practice. And he kind of gave an indirect answer, basically saying that, well, he was already planning to take a rest day. So, was Thursday actually more of a rest day and more of a day for him to recover from whatever ankle tweak that he'd suffered from getting stepped on. So I think we were probably always headed toward this. If he were going to miss a day, it seemed like he got out of Sunday's game, despite the loss, in pretty good shape. He was still running around, pretty well at the end of this one. So it's just strange to see any quarterback, this late in the season and this consequential of a game in the season, missing a day of practice for rest. It's not like he's coming off a compressed 2 games in 5 days type of scenario. It's just a normal week to week tempo for him. So John Harbaugh, credit to him, was forthright with us that it was going to be a rest day. That's indeed what it was. No other injury designations on that injury report. And, that has people feeling a certain kind of way.
Yeah. John Harbaugh, when asked about it Monday, he said, there's no science to it. He said, these guys go through a lot, Lamar as much as anybody. He said, you'd like everybody to be out there for practice, ideally. Quote, but if it's not the best thing to practice because you want to get your body right, I think you have to respect that as a coach. I know you have to respect that as a coach. So I respect Lamar and his judgment. And I thought he played very well. I thought he played very well in the game, as in Sunday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. When you talk about Lamar and injuries, how much scar tissue is there for you, Jonas, having covered around this time of year in several previous seasons, Lamar going through injuries and not knowing the status, and hearing from John Harbaugh, who continues to back his quarterback and say he has faith and believe that he's going to play at 100% level. And then you are out there on the practice field and you don't see Lamar Jackson. There is so much scar tissue when it comes to this. And I feel like it's impossible to divorce his current situation from what we've seen from him in the past, where 2 of his previous seasons were ended early because of injury.
Yeah. And one of those seasons, there was a kind of embarrassing charade for everyone involved, where Lamar was dealing with a knee injury. He comes out for practice. He's clearly hobbled. I don't know if it was Lamar thinking that he could get through it. I don't know if it was the Ravens asking him to come out so that they can make whatever team was next on the schedule would think that he was actually coming back. But he was clearly not moving well. There was video of him hobbling that was shot by reporters at practice that got out that made the Ravens very unhappy. I think that was the last time that we saw Lamar that season. And, every week it was a will he or won't he situation with Lamar. At least now we know that he's going to play in these games. That seemed like completely off the table back in 2021, 2022, where we just didn't know if he's going to be coming back at a certain point, because you hear things about him not being in the facility, not rehabbing. Is he practicing? Is he okay? Is he waiting for something? Obviously, the contract situation was the elephant in the room, with all that kind of hanging over the matter of leverage and everything. So it's a little bit apples to oranges, because we know that Lamar is going to play. We know that he's talked about how there are certain things that he feels like he's not going to be able to, or that he hasn't gotten over and might not be able to get over this season, the lingering injuries that he's dealt with this year. But this is a new kind of, it's a new kind of Rorschach test, because we know that he's in the building. We know that he's well enough to practice. We know that he's well enough to play, certainly. But the fact that it is just a thing where he's not even being listed with an injury anymore, and now is not able to practice, or choosing not to practice, and the Ravens are giving him that license, it's a little strange. He's the quarterback. I know that they've given veterans rest days in the past, but no one is as important to any team sports success as the quarterback. And I think that's where the kind of rubber hits the road.
Yeah, he's literally an MVP. I mean, few quarterbacks are as important to their team success as Lamar Jackson, as we've seen in the past. And there is, again, the specter of upcoming contract talks that is hanging over this. Now, things are not as dire as they were 3 years ago, when they were not sure if Lamar Jackson was going to be under contract or playing for this team long term. But he's carrying a $75 million cap hit next year. That's untenable. So the Ravens need to extend him, restructure, do whatever they need to do. And this certainly has an effect on that. I don't know what kind of effect, because when these two parties are having negotiations, you could hear the Ravens side of things saying, well, you missed a lot of practice time. And you could hear Lamar's side of things saying, I played hurt. I played through a lot of pain this year. I should be rewarded for that. You've also seen new weird things this year. I mean, you mentioned the video from a few years ago of Lamar looking hobbled. He didn't look too great coming out of the bye when he was limited in practice against the Bears. He didn't look 100%. And we were almost wondering if that was partly a charade to keep the Bears guessing as to who was going to be starting at quarterback. Obviously, that game is started by Tyler Huntley. He plays pretty well, but that was kind of a weird situation where we felt like maybe is Lamar pushing himself too much to be out here at practice. And then obviously the wrong injury designation during a practice participation, listed as a full participant. He was in fact practicing with the scout team that should be a limited participant. Ravens are fined for that. So we've seen weird new twists and turns in the saga of Lamar Jackson. And you look at the play on the field on Sundays, and no secret about it, Lamar has not been playing up to his standard. He is not playing at an MVP level. He is not running as much, although he did look perhaps his best, I think, athletically in the running game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He ran it in for a touchdown, but he still does not look 100%. His decision-making, his accuracy still is not all there. Jonas, to you, how much of that can we ascribe to him missing practices during the week?
I don't know.
It's impossible to tell, right?
Yeah, you can't prove a counterfactual like that. As we talked about on this podcast after Sunday's game, my gut instinct reaction after seeing that 2-minute drive just completely fall apart, not barely able to get in a field goal range, despite having almost a timeout, a Steelers defense that was worn out and missed a couple bodies. They just were not good. They needed basically a minute to move like 10 yards. And from there, the rest of the drive seemed doomed. And is that because the Steelers finally had an answer for Lamar? Is it because Lamar was unlucky? Is it because Lamar had not been able to get in the kind of reps in these type of situational football drills that he's needed to in the past? I mean, I think Lamar's never really been that great of a 2-minute drill quarterback. That's just, not really his strength as I kind of go through the mental Rolodex of games that he's come back in. So maybe something like this was always kind of doomed to meet regression affecting him that way. But, all 4 of these games down the stretch are going to be close. Like, I think the line in each of those probably won't be more than 3 or 4 points either way. The Packers, for being what they are, I don't think they're going to be favored by a huge amount. The Patriots, despite leading the AFC right now, are coming to Baltimore and are not some super team if you look at the analytics. So in cases like that, why not give yourself as much of an edge as possible? And, I just kind of went back last night and looked at some of other quarterbacks, some of Lamar's peers around the NFL to see what they've done when they've either been sidelined or coming back from injury. And, it's possible that Lamar is indeed out there at practice on these days where he's listed as a DNP and getting mental reps. So if this is inaccurate, I completely apologize to Lamar and all the Lamar stands. But, Jordan Love last year with the Packers suffers an MCL sprain. He's still going out there to Packers practices, doing the mental reps while the ones are carrying on about their business. Kyler Murray, 2023, he's rehabbing his ACL, but it's a new Cardinals offense in training camp. So he's standing behind the line of scrimmage with a walkie-talkie, listening to play calls in his earpiece and watching what happened so that he can get as much up to speed as possible with this new offense. And Lamar, obviously, we asked John about it on Monday. He feels like all of the playbook is still available to Lamar and Todd Monken because this is, old hat at this point.
Yeah, year 3 with Monken.
Right. There are probably, certain things that are evolving on a week-to-week basis, maybe some wrinkles to plays, maybe some new plays based on who they're playing or what kind of personnel that they have. But I just think that, either if Lamar is hurt, then he can put himself in a situation where he's not going to be prone to injury in these practices. And if some of these struggles come down to confidence, then put yourself in a situation where you are out there trying to better understand certain defenses and certain coverages and certain pass rushes, so that when you are under the bright lights and you do have to lead a 2-minute drill, you feel just a slight bit more prepared. And maybe that's the difference between a win and a loss. Maybe that difference between a loss is the difference between you sitting at home in the postseason and you actually making it back to the playoffs and potentially giving this team an opportunity to realize those Super Bowl dreams. So, all this is a black box. All this is just us kind of talking out of our ass. We don't really know what the situation is, but we do just have to acknowledge the rarity of a quarterback in a must-win type of situation missing 1 of 3 days of practice, and probably the most important day of practice, to rest.
Yeah, and I think we are at a disadvantage in terms of there's a information gap here. We don't know exactly what's going on that's wrong. If the Ravens knew, they would be fixing it. As Todd Monken says every week, they're going to fight like hell to fix it.
Yeah.
But this offense has been struggling for weeks now, and the information that we have is that Lamar is playing through injuries, and the information that we have is that Lamar is missing practice. And so when you see things that are disjointed on Sundays, like Rashad Bateman dropping that ball on the crossing route that should have been a first down and maybe a touchdown. You see on the 4th down call by the goal line, after Isaiah Likely is not able to secure the catch, you see Lamar Jackson throw a ball into the end zone that bounces off the hands of Mark Andrews, and you see DeAndre Hopkins in the back of the end zone befuddled as to why that ball was not intended. That ball was intended for him, and it didn't make his way to him.
I asked Mark about that yesterday. He was pretty convinced that Lamar was looking for him. He said that they locked eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Although you watch the end zone view of that shot, and certainly it looks like that ball could have been headed for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think DeAndre Hopkins was more open on that play than Mark Andrews was. But that ball probably, if it was headed towards Hopkins, should have been thrown a little bit higher if it was going to get there. But you see little things that are wrong. I mean, the accuracy issues for Lamar Jackson.
5 straight games under 60%.
Yeah, and the balls that are thrown down the field. He throws a ball to DeAndre Hopkins that sails out of bounds that probably should have given him an opportunity. He throws the deep ball to Zay Flowers early that was maybe a little bit overthrown, and then he tries to find him again on that same drive in the end zone and underthrows that ball. So when you see the little things be out of sync in the offense, you think, well, maybe if Lamar had been practicing all week, maybe if he had not missed Wednesday's practice, we would see a cleaner product on Sundays.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if this is Occam's razor, and I don't know what it portends for the rest of his career, but
portends, word of the day.
It's also possible that like Lamar just doesn't like practicing, and we saw him skip. We saw him forfeit $750,000. Remember this offseason in workout bonuses for not showing up to OTAs, and that was in his contract for a reason, because the Ravens wanted to incentivize him going to practice. And other smaller things like me talking to Tez Walker this offseason, and him mentioning to me that Lamar had expressed interest in holding these wide receiver quarterback summits in the time between OTAs and training camp, and it never coming together. And it could have been it could have been the fault of one side. It could have been the fault of both people. Maybe just they realized that their schedules wouldn't work. But all this coming together in this kind of way, it just makes you speculate. And you could be the biggest Lamar fan in the world and still acknowledge that like there are some things that maybe he doesn't like to do as much as the normal quarterback. And it certainly hasn't mattered because he's already on a Hall of Fame trajectory. This has been a Ravens team that should have been to Super Bowl at least once in this Lamar era. It hasn't. But you just kind of wonder what is going to come of this, if anything. Like, is this going to make Lamar more inclined to go to practice in the future? It's going to make him less inclined to go to practice in the future. He's just inscrutable. It's honestly kind of hard to know.
Actually, inscrutable is our word of the day now, not portend. All right, let's turn the page and look to this game on Sunday. Ravens come in at 6-7, facing the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that they just faced on Thanksgiving, a game that they lost 32-14 after they committed five turnovers against that Cincinnati Bengals team that is now 4-9 after losing to the Buffalo Bills in the snow. There was a brief glimmer of hope in Cincinnati that the return of Joe Burrow would lead them back into contention in the AFC North. They looked up at the Ravens and the Steelers and they said, maybe we can get our way back into this thing. And then they lost to the Bills and that pretty much doomed them. I think they have like a 1% chance now. They're technically not eliminated, but they are done. But that does not mean that they're not going to be playing hard. We know Joe Burrow likes to face the Ravens. We know that Joe Burrow, especially when he has his full complement of weapons, can be extremely dangerous. He didn't even have his full complement of weapons when they faced on Thanksgiving. T. Higgins was not playing in that game. That didn't stop the Bengals from lighting up the Ravens secondary. We're not sure if T. Higgins is going to play in this game because he missed the Ravens game with a concussion, then played against the Bills, and then went back into concussion protocol and was a limited participant in Wednesday's practice in Cincinnati. But Jonas, a lot of things have to change for the Ravens in this game, this time around. And it obviously starts with the turnovers. They can't be out there committing 5 turnovers. At times, even the Ravens defense, despite the fact that they gave up 32 points and struggled to contain that Bengals offense, the first turnover of the game for the Ravens, when Lamar Jackson just coughs up the ball in his own territory, the Ravens defense steps up and is able to get the ball back for the Ravens. But you cannot give the Bengals 5 opportunities, 5 extra possessions that they should not have.
Yeah, and you also have to do everything that you can to take the ball away yourself. You know, like that was a huge turning point in that game between the Bills and the Bengals, was that Christian Benford pick 6. And this has been a Ravens defense that has, for the most part, just been unable to come away with takeaways against Pro Bowl level quarterbacks. You know, I wrote about it for Wednesday. I think the ratio was 14 touchdowns to 0 interceptions in the 6 games or so that they've played against, the best. And Joe Burrow, like Aaron Rodgers, does a good job of kind of keeping the ball out of harm's way, but you can still find a way to strip the ball. You can find a way to, get lucky by getting the pass rush in his face. We saw Lamar wasn't at fault for his interception in that game against the Bengals, but, Isaiah Likely was, the pass protection was, and that leads to a tip and an interception by one of the worst linebackers in the NFL, Demetrius Knight. So you just have to put yourself in position to, 1, on offense, not give away the ball in the dumbest ways possible. And then 2, on defense, maybe finally start to turn the tide a little bit against these elite quarterbacks and start to get the ball back, give your offense some short fields, and find a way to generate some momentum that just has been sort of lacking on defense the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and a large reason that the Bills were able to beat the Bengals is because of 2 interceptions that Joe Burrow threw late in that game. So Ravens need more of that. They also need to get the ball to Derrick Henry more frequently. Derrick Henry in that Thanksgiving game scores an early touchdown. You're thinking the Ravens offense is back. They figured out a way to get the King back involved. They're going to ride him the rest of the way, and then they stop giving him the ball. He had only 10 carries for 60 yards in that game. It was a frustrating performance again for Derrick Henry. Only 5 carries for Derrick Henry after the first quarter. He was non-existent in the second quarter. How can the Ravens get more plays, get more touches for their running back?
Well, I think we talked about this after that game. Big part of Derrick Henry's inactivity was just the game script. Like, that second quarter was weird. They should have scored on that Isaiah Likely catch and run score. Then they get into field goal range again and they're knocked out on the 3rd and 10 sack or whatever it was. And then obviously you have fumble, you have a 2-minute drill, and then the second half you're just playing catch up the entire time. So they can't afford to go down like they did in Cincinnati or against Cincinnati. They can't afford to go down like they did Sunday against Pittsburgh, where it's 17-3. Credit to Todd Monken for continuing to pound away in Sunday's game with Derrick Henry. It's the first game since week 1 that they've had over 200 rushing yards, which is just incredible considering what a juggernaut this was on the ground last year. But it's just like the mark of a good, healthy Ravens offense is committing to the run, because when you commit to the run, that opens up the play action. I think the Bills, who obviously have a kind of similar ethos to the Ravens and how they want to approached this game on offense, had like a play action rate over 50% against Cincinnati. And you want to get these safeties under stress. You want to get these linebackers under stress. We saw the tight ends have a really, really good game despite not having a whole lot of play action in week 13. So, obviously a lot of this is contingent on the play up front. Again, Ravens fans are having just a heck of a time online, laughing at Andrew Voorhees, laughing at Daniel Failele. This is not a great Bengals front, but they won enough tests in week 13 that the Ravens were convinced to do other stuff, especially on dropbacks. So they just need to find a way to get Derrick Henry, late season Derrick Henry in gear. We know that historically he's a lot better at the end of seasons, a lot better at the end of games than he is at the start. Maybe we're starting to see the tide finally turn. Maybe we're starting to see the Ravens' physicality, even though it's not really been expressed that often, catch up with other teams. It's just, this is the game where you have to get right. We talked about it 2 weeks ago.
The first time. Yeah.
We talked about it with the Ravens defense after the Pittsburgh game. Like, this is a game where I think if everything goes your way, you shouldn't have to break a sweat to get to 30 points.
Yeah. And this is a secondary. This is a defense that, again, we talked about weeks ago. Can be had, should be had. This is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. This is one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. And it's not just the tight ends who combined last time, Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, for 142 receiving yards in that loss to the Bengals a few weeks ago. I thought that was going to be the nadir for Isaiah Likely, and then things got worse the week after that. But it's just been a nightmare season for him. But also, you got to get the wide receivers involved. The Ravens made a clear effort in the game plan last week to get Zay Flowers involved. They did that. They got to, at some point, get DeAndre Hopkins involved. I mean, I thought at some point this season we would see at least one breakout game for D-Hop. And I know he's not who he was. I know he is not the caliber receiver that he used to be. He is still a good jump ball artist. He is still going to catch the ball if you throw it his way. He's not going to get the most separation every time. But for him, 13 games in the season so far, to have just 30 targets. I mean, he had 80 targets last season between the Titans and the Chiefs. He had 137 targets the season before that with the Titans. He's got to get more than 30 targets in a game. And Lamar just has to throw him the ball in a spot where he can catch it.
Without looking at these notes right here, do you want to guess how many red zone targets he has?
3?
1.
I mean, Jonas, we talked about early in the season, goal line fades, and you hate the goal line fade. I mean, it's not a high percentage play.
No.
But the Ravens are running goal line fades with Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
How can that be the guy that you run a fade to? I don't understand that at all. If you're going to draw up a play like that, it should be towards D-Hop, because for the most part, he has shown that he can still wrestle the ball away from a defender.
Right.
That back shoulder throw that Lamar threw him a couple weeks ago was the first back shoulder throw to an outside wide receiver in Lamar Jackson's career?
Right.
It's just maybe at this point where we've reached the point where there's just not going to be an X receiver that's going to really get along with Lamar Jackson, that they're ever going to really be on the same page on the field. They continue to say good things about each other, obviously off the field. They clearly have a ton of respect for each other, but they just, for whatever reason, can't seem to get things gelling on the field.
If this season continues to go off the tracks and the Ravens end up with like a top 16 pick, I think we're probably going to spend a lot of time talking about one Carnell Tate, the big boy for Ohio State, classic X receiver who kind of fits the mold for what Eric Acosta has talked about, the kind of guy that he's wanted to get Lamar Jackson. Would obviously be a nice, cheap rookie contract and would give Lamar a very interesting piece downfield. But thinking about this game, the Bengals do not have a lot of studs on defense, but one of the guys that they have who is a Mr. Reliable is their cornerback, DJ Turner. Like he's been one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL this year, but that means that you can take advantage of the other spots. Dax Hill has not been good. Jalen Davis is their relatively new slot corner. He's historically been a special teams player. That is a guy who you look at that kind of description. Someone like that is prime for the taking. I think he's basically never really played more than a couple games per season as a defensive player. So maybe that's maybe like the secondary receiver in this becomes the tight end, but you feel like this could be a big confidence boost kind of game for a Rashad or for a D-Hop, or maybe even like a Tylan Wallace who's getting involved, or maybe Devontae Walker, becomes, because he was so close to a couple deep shots in that game against Cincinnati. Maybe he gets involved with this one.
We should talk a little bit more about the offensive line, though, because it continues to be the topic. Obviously, that Bengals game, the first Lamar Jackson turnover was caused by Roger Rosengarten, Daniel Falele on the right side, not making their correct blocks, and Lamar is backed up and ends up fumbling. It continues to be an issue. These two guys, you said Ravens fans are laughing at Daniel Falele, Andrew Voorhees online. I think they're cry laughing. I think it's just pure frustration. Emory Jones Jr. got snaps a few weeks ago. It was like 13, 16 snaps in that game. Commits a hold. Didn't play a single snap against Pittsburgh. John Harbaugh said Emory Jones, if the play was better, if the play was even equal to the play of Andrew Voorhees, they would consider it again. But do you think that they're now, for the foreseeable future, going to put Emory Jones Jr. back on the bench and just not give him any snaps?
I have no clue. I have no clue, because none of these guards are really standing out.
I mean, that's how it
Emory
sounded
Jones
to me.
didn't really stand out either. So I don't know if at this point you're sacrificing continuity to get the young guy some reps. It's just a situation where I don't know what the Ravens value, honestly. Like, do they want to get a little bit more athletic with a guy like Emory Jones? Like, you still see Andrew Voorhees ending up on his feet way too often in all this.
You mean ending up on his back?
Well, yeah, sorry, and on his back, getting knocked off his feet.
Yeah, hopefully he's on his feet.
Emory Jones, again, he has not played barely at all because of his offseason shoulder surgery. He only came back, I think, in mid October to finally get practicing. So,
and Ben Cleveland has been suspended 3 games.
Ben Cleveland is not in the picture at this point. Corey Bullock was the only guy to play on Sunday besides that starting 5. So it's a tough situation. We just haven't really got a whole lot of film of Emory Jones to evaluate that. The coaches have gotten a deeper look at this.
I know you mentioned Carnell Tate being a potential early round pick for the Ravens. I mean, I think Ravens fans will be clamoring. I know interior offensive line is not a position that is often taken in the first round with much frequency in the NFL draft, but I think a lot of Ravens fans will be clamoring for offensive line to go early and often in the Ravens 2026 draft. And then on the defensive side, let's talk about what the Ravens can do in order to contain Joe Burrow. And I think it starts with getting off the field. I mean, there were a lot of times in that game where the Bengals were able to convert on third down. 8 of 19 on third down in week 13. You add T. Higgins to the picture, that number's not going to get a whole lot better for the Ravens. How can the Ravens get the Bengals off the field?
You got to win up front. That's just as simple as that. Like, it was fun to go back and look at some of the film from that game and just see the chess match between Joe Burrow and Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton and Zach Orr. And, a lot of these third nines, it's Joe Burrow getting the Bengals into 7-man protection. So there are only 3 receivers, sometimes going up against like 6 DBs on these downfield routes, on these third and long situations. And the Bengals still winning because the Ravens cannot get home. And you have Nate Wiggins and Alohi Gilman doubling Jamar Chase, but he still somehow gets open. That's just a credit to the kind of receiver that the Bengals have and that the Ravens do not have. That Jamar Chase, without any Robin to take any of the pressure off him, is still able to get his. It wasn't a super efficient game for him in week 13, but he still went for basically 100 yards and had another impact performance against the Ravens. If T. Higgins is available in this, and let's say Cheeto cannot play, you wonder, can these outside cornerbacks hold up downfield? Because we know just how Joe Burrow, relies on these back shoulder throws to pierce these defenses when they go single high. So the Ravens just have to win with the pass rush. This Bengals offensive line, I think, is much improved from what it was early on. They didn't really get a whole lot going with the run game on Sunday, which is kind of surprising because we all know how bad Buffalo's run defense is. So maybe the tide is starting to turn there in a good way for the Ravens. But yeah, they just have to find a way to get home. I think they sacked Burrow just the one time in that Week 13 game. They're going to need a better pass rush, or at least a more destructive pass rush.
And in terms of the stakes for this game, it's your favorite segment of the podcast, which is the New York Times playoff picture. Ravens have a 27% chance of making the playoffs as we sit here on Thursday. If they win, if they beat the Bengals in Cincinnati, that goes up to 40%. If they lose, their percentage goes all the way down to 14%. I feel like, you've seen Social Network?
Yep.
One of the greatest. Do you remember the scene near the end where they're talking about the shares being diluted down to? How much were these shares diluted down to? How much were these shares diluted down to? And then it gets to Andrew Garfield and it's 0.02%.
Yeah.
That's how it feels with this. With a win and a Steelers loss to the Dolphins on Monday Night Football, the playoff odds rise all the way up to 50%. And with a loss and a Steelers win, the Ravens' odds of making the playoffs go down to 11%. It's a massive game, Jonas. How are you feeling about their best chances to win over the next 4 weeks? And do you think that this is perhaps the best of them?
Well, I think if we get to a point where the Steelers already have the AFC North wrapped up in Week 18 and they're benching Aaron Rodgers and resting some of their starters, then that is the kind of game that the Steelers have won against the Ravens in years past, because the Ravens
2023
have said, we're going to prepare for the postseason. We don't care a whole lot about this. But I mean, on paper, this is still a historically bad Bengals defense. This is still a Bengals offense that might not have T. Higgins. The Ravens are obviously favored. I don't know in how many of these games you can say that's going to be the case. So, yeah, I mean, I think, still no Trey Hendrickson. We still know that the kind of psychic hold that Lamar has on some of these Bengals players, Bengals fans, Bengals coaches. So the Ravens, I think, have to feel okay about this, despite how badly they played on Sunday. But if they don't win, then that really becomes the interesting question here, because I think absolutely, with all of the agitation around Lamar and the veterans on this team who came to chase a ring, and just the push for young players getting more snaps in a potentially lost season, it could get kind of a toxic brew in that locker room around that coaching staff.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to take another quick break. And on the other side, we're going to give you our predictions for this game.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas, before we get to our predictions, we do have to talk about the breaking news that came across our Twitter timelines from ESPN's Adam Schefter not long ago, and that's that the Ravens have agreed to a 3-year extension with Travis Jones. That deal keeps him with Baltimore through the 2028 season. Jonas, we know that this Ravens team is going to be needing any defensive lineman that they can get their hands on this offseason. They keep Travis Jones in Baltimore, and for a team that doesn't yet know, perhaps they know, we certainly don't know, the future of one Nnamdi Madubuike, the Ravens decide they want to keep one of their guys in-house.
It's big money. Frankly, bigger than I thought it would be. 3 years, $40.5 million. That's a lot of cheddar. About what, $13+ million per year for a guy who has not really given you a whole lot as a pass rusher. I thought it would probably be closer to 10 million, just based on the fact that I think the Ravens have been through the muck with guys like Brandon Williams, who've been linchpin run defenders, but have not been able to contribute as pass rushers, and what kind of impact that leaves on your defense with a guy who's only able to be an impact player on run downs. I think, we've seen Travis Jones, when he's had more help on the inside, when he's had more help on the outside, be disruptive as a pass rusher, but he's not Dexter Lawrence. He's not, like Vita Vea in his prime, but he's a guy who's been reliable. He's been an incredible run defender. I think despite how poorly this Ravens season has started, The run defense has again returned to being the kind of form that makes it one of the NFL's best. I think he makes Roquan Smith's life a lot easier. He makes Teddy Buchanan's life a lot easier. He makes Zach Orr's life a lot easier. He's clearly still an ascending talent. I mean, he's just a load of a man. Pound for pound, despite being as big as he is, probably one of the strongest players on this Ravens team, if not the NFL. I mean, you've seen him around the facility. He's just biceps popping, pecs popping, just a total freak of a man at a position with like a circus of freaks. So obviously we have to wait and see what exactly how the money's laid out. We don't know what the guaranteed money is. We don't know the contract structure, but I think important that the Ravens have locked down this interior piece, because if you looked at what next year could be without Madubuike, I think we probably expect them to part ways with Broderick Washington. You needed a foundational piece for this group to kind of help clarify things for the future. And Travis Jones, I think, was always the guy who made the most sense.
Yeah, and perhaps a good uplifting note in the middle of the week for Travis Jones after he's called for a penalty, personal foul against the Pittsburgh Steelers, going up the middle on the field goal attempt.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And finding out from the league, the Ravens did, that was actually not a foul. He did not make contact with the head or neck area of the long snapper in that instance, but Steelers end up scoring on that. And good for Travis Jones. He answered questions about that after the game as well. And now he gets locked up with an extension. All right, Jonas, let's talk about our predictions. Who do you have winning this game against the Cincinnati Bengals?
I'm not going to pick the Ravens again this season until they win a game. So I'm going with Bengals 24, Ravens 23. I think if T. Higgins plays in this one, that is going to be a big deal. I think his absence was a big reason in me not picking the Ravens to win in week 13. I think that despite all the concussion stuff, the fact that he was able to practice on Wednesday in a limited fashion should give Cincinnati some hope that he could be available on Sunday. And I just think that Joe Burrow, this Ravens offense is probably liable to, give you a couple 3-and-outs. It's liable to give you a couple red zone trips with only a field goal. It's just, that is still the big issue, around this team. I mean, the one thing we didn't even mention from that game against Cincinnati and Baltimore was like the Bengals won that game running away despite going 1 for 6 in the red zone. So I think they should expect some positive regression. And if they get that on Sunday and the Ravens still continue to struggle on their own end in the red zone, then could this game also get out of hand for the Ravens? Could it also end up ugly? I just don't feel good about where this team is. It's a relatively healthy team aside from Lamar and possibly Cheeto Awuzie. But I just think that for me, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, call me the positivity rabbit, Jonas,
okay,
because I am predicting that the Ravens will win this game. I expect the unexpected when it comes to this Ravens team, and I don't want to be too influenced by what we've seen recently. I still believe in the talent of this team. I don't feel great about this pick at all, but I think with their backs against the wall, maybe the Ravens are able to pull something out of a rabbit out of a hat, perhaps. 24. No, what did I predict? 27-24. The Ravens win this game in Cincinnati and keep things going. That's my prediction. What do you have coming on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months? Anything good this week?
We don't know if our little pet story is coming out this week. It might come out next week. So
our pet story being we can't reveal it yet on the podcast. It's a heck of a tease, though.
Yeah, I asked a question to John Harbaugh about it on Wednesday, so I guess the secret is somewhat out. But yeah.
So hopefully nobody steals it in the meantime.
Yeah, just a normal preview coming out tomorrow and usual coverage from Cincinnati on Sunday.
Sounds good. Jonas will be in Cincinnati. I will be back here in Baltimore. We will have a podcast after that game hitting your podcast feeds where you can rate, review, and subscribe. If you write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I will read it out here on the show, Jonas. And of course, subscribe to the Baltimore Banner.
Shout out to the Banner.
Jonas Shaffer, Childs Walker, Gianna Hahn, Kyle Goon have so much more in store.